Welcome back everyone, my name is Nick, and on this channel I discuss topics about health and fitness, so if that's something that you're interested in, you're in the right place. I think a lot of people know that when it comes to putting on muscle or losing weight, you need to manage your calories properly. But before you can go on that dedicated bulk or cut phase, you need to figure out what your maintenance calories are first, which is essentially just the calories that you need to maintain your current body weight. Basically, you need a starting point before you can figure out what surplus or deficit you'll be in, and I'm going to go over 3 ways you can do that and explain some of the pros and cons of each method. By the end, you should feel confident and knowledgeable on how to estimate this value. The first method is the easiest, and it's just to use a calorie maintenance calculator. You can find them online through any meal tracking app like myfitnesspal, although I should make it clear that any app should work just fine. Now, most of these calculators are pretty straightforward, plug and chug the numbers, but make sure you get your units correct. Some of them use the imperial system and some of them use metric units. Now, the good thing about these calculators is that they are convenient and you have options to decide on which one you want to use. Some equations include more factors such as age and body weight, while others only consider your weight and activity level. If you want to have a rough estimate of your maintenance calories, any one of these calculators can give you that in no time. The problem is that these equations really cannot account for the individual variations of someone's body composition. Someone at 5'10", such as myself, can have a much different resting metabolic rate than someone else at 5'10", depending on how much fat or muscle they have. Even when you account for these variations with different activity multipliers, you're still getting an estimate that can be off. As an example, I calculated my maintenance calories from 3 commonly used equations, and here are the results. As you can see, these are some pretty noticeable variations. And which value should I choose? 2 of these values differ by over 100 calories. That's a noticeable difference. So here's an example. Let's say my maintenance calories is at 2,800, but I choose a calculation at 3,000. I then choose to cut my calories by 200 because I want to lose weight at a slower pace. Well, all I've really done now is put myself at maintenance value. So there won't be any noticeable change on the scale if I'm trying to lose weight. Now, eventually I'll make this realization and then make further adjustments over time, but as you can see, there are some flaws that can be had when it comes to using the online calculator. The second method is a bit more tedious and takes time, but in my opinion, it's worth it to get a more accurate and individualized value. For 1 week, track your calorie intake without deviating from how you normally eat. Don't judge or change your habits during this week. As long as your body weight has been relatively stable and your activity level isn't drastically changing, then the average calorie intake of that week should give you a reasonable value for your calorie maintenance. The only time this method may not work too well is if your activity level suddenly changes during or very near the week you are tracking. Now, the good thing about this method is that, as I said, it's very individualized. Instead of using a standard equation, which can introduce a lot of variance, you're using your own dietary habits to reach a value. The bad thing about this method, and I actually don't really consider this to be a bad thing, but it's that it simply takes a little bit of time. But if you're committed in gaining muscle or fat loss, odds are this trade-off in time won't really be that big of a deal. If you have even the slightest notion of how long it takes to build muscle or lose fat, you'll know that patience is something that you need when it comes to fitness anyway. In fact, if you use an equation, as I mentioned previously above, that gives you a value that's off from your actual maintenance value, you'll probably also be spending time adjusting until you find out what that actual value is anyway. Now, the third method is simply having your resting metabolic rate, or your RMR, measured by a professional. Now, I actually had this done through a process called MetaCheck, where they measure your RMR through a 10-minute breathing test. This process needed to be done while I was in a fasted state and also earlier in the morning, where I hadn't done much of anything physically and, was in a sufficiently fasted state. Now, aside from it being absolutely boring as all hell, sitting with a breathing tube in my mouth, it was a pretty interesting experience. Now, it's not one that I would care to repeat, but what surprised me was that the overall result of my calorie maintenance calculated from the RMR wasn't too far off from my own estimation. Now, it's hard for me to suggest who would benefit from this method because on one hand, you get your calorie maintenance value within 10 minutes with a pretty confident result. On the other hand, it's not the most pleasant experience and it costs money. For me, it was about $50 American, which is like the equivalent of paying 5 months of Netflix up front. If you are just starting to get into the area of fitness, I really encourage you to go for the second method because that type of hands-on experience will not only get you off to a good start, but it provides you with understanding on how to track your calories. However, if you are someone who is interested in the experience of having your resting metabolic rate measured, like I was, or if you're someone who is tracking their maintenance but also introducing a drastic change to their activity level, or if time is just an issue, I would recommend this route. All right, folks, I hope this video helped. While it's important to accurately measure calorie maintenance before you try to build muscle or lose fat, it's also important to understand that you can't get an exact or precise value. And even if you could, there is no way that number would be the exact same the day after. How you act day to day, no matter how consistent you are, will still have some individual variance. A lot of people think of their maintenance as a value that they have to hit, like a bullseye target, but in reality, you simply want to get a value that's as close to that bullseye as possible. Otherwise, you're just gonna stress out, and honestly, that's not a really great thing to have either. So hopefully this video teaches you how to calculate your calorie maintenance. If you have any questions, comments, or things to add, leave them down below, and I'd love to start a conversation. Anyway, I'll see you all next time.